Bernice King, Jonathan Majors right there, and Coretta Scott King. So why is this story important? A lot of people didn't know about it. Why is this story important? Well, because the guy right there, he's an actor. He compared his girlfriend to, well, Coretta Scott King. Story goes like this. So Majors had mentioned Coretta Scott King twice. Once on a recording played during his domestic violence trial, and again in his recent Good Morning America appearance. So because he mentioned Coretta Scott King, her daughter, Bernice, said, I'm going to get involved. So she took to social media. She went on X after Majors mentioned his mom's name while addressing his girlfriend's support during his recent domestic violence case. While she didn't mention Major's name in her post, she wanted to remind people that her mother, a civil rights icon, wasn't a prop. Bernice said, she was a peace advocate before she met my father and was instrumental in him speaking out against the Vietnam War, she wrote. Please understand, my mama was a force. So her statements came a day after this guy's appearance on Good Morning America, since being convicted of a misdemeanor assault and harassment in an incident involving his ex-partner, Grace Jabari. At one point during the interview, the actor explained how he wanted the women in his life to be like Coretta Scott King. He also called his current partner, Megan Good, an angel. She's held me down like a Coretta Scott King. I'm so blessed to have her. So Bernice King's mother's name was also mentioned during the trial. They played an audio recording that they played in court. And the actor could be heard saying he was a great man and urged Jabari to be more like Michelle Obama and Coretta Scott King. When asked about his comments in the recording during his Good Morning America interview, he said, it was me trying to give an analogy of what it is I'm aspiring to be. These great men, Martin, President Obama, I need her in that case, Grace, to make the same sacrifices I am making. And that's interesting. So was he making a sacrifice when he mentioned he wants to be like those men? Now, when you're making a sacrifice, you're giving up something for something else. So you're trying to be a good man, but what are you giving up to be a good man? Just be a good man. Okay? And so Bernice, she was really upset about that. And she said, which I'm going to read about, she says her mom was a force. And she wrote this in the Huffington Post in 2017, titled, A Woman's Proposed to be a King, which she talked about her mom's impact. And it's so interesting. Coretta Scott King, I guess she was really a queen. So here's that story that Bernice wrote. A woman proposed to be a king. My mother left her mark. Women and girls and all of humanity are better for it. Before my mother was a king, she was a Scot from Marion, Alabama, the daughter of resilient, righteous parents. Obadiah and Bernice, who drove the bus that transported my mom and other Black students to school. Coretta Scott was born to a woman who supported the community. Before my mother was a king, she climbed trees and wrestled with boys, and she won. Even as a child, Coretta Scott demonstrated that her gender would not deter her success, nor did it detract from her strengths. Before she was a king, my mother was a civil rights activist, a member of the NAACP and the Race Relations and Civil Liberties Committees at Antioch College. Coretta Scott was determined that her life would serve to lift others. She was already a woman of great character. Before my mother was a king, she was a gifted vocalist and musician whose skill and academic garnered her a scholarship to the prestigious New England Conservatory for Music in Boston. Coretta Scott's path to Boston exemplified her commitment to being a woman of excellence. Look at that picture. That's really a prestigious, esteemed picture. That's really a picture of a queen. Before she was king, my mother was a peace advocate, a courageous leader, and an accomplished artist. When my father, Martin Luther King Jr., encountered her in Boston, he encountered a whole woman, a woman of substance, a woman who, as the traditional Black Baptist church still sings, had a charge to keep, a God to glorify. Before she was a king, my mother was a peace advocate, a courageous leader, and an accomplished artist. Before she was a king, my mother had a purpose, and her marriage to a man who would become one of the most celebrated leaders in history further propelled her toward that purpose. Her life before she met my father contributed to the foundations for them to build a life and co-labor in the movement together. Of her, he said, she saw the greatness of the movement and had a unique willingness to sacrifice herself for its continuation. Her life with my father was remarkable, despite, you say that again. Her life with my father was a remarkable display of consistency to purpose, as Coretta Scott King not only excelled as a wife, and this is interesting because she was a person who really people looked up to. You think if it hadn't been for Coretta Scott King, how much would we have had for Dr. King? Wow. Her life with my father was a remarkable display of consistency to purpose, as Coretta Scott King not only excelled as a wife and mother, but also utilized her diplomacy and gift as a singer to advance the movement. My parents were partners, and she was a woman at the forefront of activism for civil and human rights. After my father's assassination in 1968, my mother's life without my father would become the clearest and most prevailing testimony to the wisdom and fortitude which had been cultivated in her since birth. That same year, she founded the Martin Luther King Jr. Center for Nonviolent Social Change in my father's birth city, Alabama. More than a monument, it is the official living memorial to Martin Luther King Jr. and was established to provide education and training on his nonviolent philosophy and strategy. With this King Center as her base, my mother pressed on to fulfill a role that changed lives in legislation. She was a woman who refused to surrender the regions of what she knew to be her assignments, even when male civil rights and business leaders tried to convince her that she should leave the work of building her husband's legacy to them. She began her journey as the architect of the King legacy. Wow. So even when people wanted her to step down, she did not. So this woman's work continued. As founding president, chair, and CEO of the King Center, Coretta Scott King, interesting, she tirelessly carried the message of nonviolence and the dream of the beloved community throughout the globe. She, along with other dedicated workers, committed herself to the dream of an MLK holiday becoming a reality. She was one of the stars of it. The dream was realized. The holiday solidified my father's worldwide influence and increased the desire of many to learn more about his life and teachings. Consider that the time of my father's death, a poll found him to be the most hated man in America. Wow. Why was he so hated? We have something on that. So find that clip for that section and let me know what you think about it. Wow. My mother's efforts as the architect of the King legacy changed the way the masses viewed Dr. King. Imagine where Dr. King's legacy would be if Coretta Scott had not been purported to be there with him. Imagine if she had not been a woman on fire for social justice and for nonviolent social change. Imagine if she had listened to those who wanted to put her in a gender box and limit her ability to lead as a legacy builder. Imagine if she had not been willing to be arrested by and for something greater than herself. Wow. She left her mark. Women and girls and all of humanity are better for it. The best way to express our gratitude is by embracing the philosophy that my mother believed was the path to building the beloved community. In this critical moment for our global community, let us live nonviolence. The principles and steps of nonviolence, which the King Center calls Nonviolent 365, will help us build a more peaceful, just, humane world, beginning with each of us. As my mother stated, people who think nonviolence is easy don't realize that it's a spiritual discipline that requires a great deal of strength, growth, and purging of the self so that one can overcome almost any obstacle for the good of all without being concerned about one's own welfare. In her honor, and for the holistic health of our global community, I acknowledge humanity to choose nonviolence. Wow. The legacy of not just Dr. King, but his wife, Coretta King. Mm. And you think that the one guy that's an actor who killed his girlfriend will be more like a queen, be more like Coretta Scott? Well, if they're not like Coretta Scott, then you pick four partners and you're not king. You're watching, keeping it honest. Yours truly, Anthony Parker. We don't just keep it simple, we keep it honest and we keep it real. Let me know what you think about that. The legacy of Coretta Scott King. When they say behind every man is a great woman, she exemplified that. She wasn't just a king, she was also a queen. Something to think about.